Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Hour of Healthy Conclusions, where we try to give our listeners important information on nutrition, exercise, and holistic, alternative, and integrative medicine. My name is Bob Neugebauer, and I will be your host for this evening's show. Tonight's show is being brought to you by Altrua Health Share, which has been serving its members and their families with their health care needs since 1997. Please take a moment to visit their website at altruahealthshare.org to see just what Altrua Health Share can offer you and your families for their health care needs, as it could mean substantial savings. Our guest for today is Michelle Martinez, or as many in the Treasure Valley know her, the Fruit Doctor. Michelle is a holistic nutritionist and chef. She's attended the University of Natural Health and earned a PhD in holistic nutrition and is currently enrolled in Cornell University's plant-based nutrition certificate course. Michelle has also studied at the T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about yourself for our audience, Michelle?
Well, I think that the motivation about why people do what they do is really important. And I know myself, I personally had come down with a female issue several years ago that was extremely painful. Some of the female listeners might recognize it. It's endometriosis. And when I went the medical route and was looking at what alternatives or what my options were, none of them sounded good. And when I spoke to other women who had the disease and went the medical route, it either came back or it didn't necessarily work for them. For some of them it did. And so I decided to use the approach that I work with my clients, and that was to change my diet and my lifestyle. I decided to accept responsibility and realize that I had brought it upon myself. I didn't feel bad about that. I realized that I was part of the culture that we live in and that I didn't know any better. But nonetheless, surgery or hormones was not some options I wanted to do, and so I changed my diet, and I used my symptoms or my lack thereof as indications on whether or not I was on the right course, and I'm happy to tell you I'm surgery-free, medication-free, and endometriosis-free. I've been able to do that with my husband's type 2 diabetes. Sadly, in our family, we've had multiple deaths. I'm now orphaned at the age of 48. But I show up each day with the intention of trying to give good information to people so that they can make choices, because at the end of the day, people in Treasure Valley and throughout the world are here because what brings meaning to their life is family, and we're having people cut short.
So you've come to the conclusion, like I have, that whole plant-based foods and nutrition are really the key to curing a lot of the diseases that are out there, and that you have to look to alternative methods because conventional medicine just does not have the answers in many cases.
Well, Bob, what a lot of people don't realize is that only 25% of all medical schools even offer a single course in nutrition. And out of those medical schools, it's not required. It's an elective. So if you ask your doctor how many hours of nutrition training they've gotten, we're looking at 8 hours max. So to go to a physician for nutritional advice is like going to your mechanic for nutritional advice. That's just not something they've been trained in. They've been trained in medicine or surgery. Now, I'm not saying that the medical industry does not bring some wonderful things to the table. If I'm in a car accident and I need my limbs attached, I need a medical doctor. I need a good surgeon. If I've got a child born with a cleft palate, they've done wonderful things to reverse that. But when some physician tells a patient that diet has nothing to do with fill in the blank, I feel a real sense of frustration, because that is simply not true, and that's not really something that they have any clinical training to be able to speak to.
Well, I tend to agree with you. I know a year and a half ago I changed my lifestyle and went on a fairly rigorous diet in terms of trying to lose 50 pounds, and a lot of it is still plant-based, almost ketogenic in some ways. But it does make a huge difference in the way you feel. I feel like I'm about 20 years younger than what I really am, but that's neither here nor there. I wanted to ask you, why do you think whole food is better than taking manufactured supplements because there are so many of them out there, and it's a $178 billion a year business.
It is. It is. Great question. Well, here's the thing. Every year we hear of new nutrients that keep on getting discovered. So what that means is whatever bottle you have on your shelf does not have that nutrient added to it. So as they keep on discovering these nutrients, what they're finding is that these nutrients work in concert with each other. In fact, Dr. Campbell's book, Whole, has got an entire page showing the different, literally hundreds, if not thousands, of chemical reactions one nutrient can go through in your body. So if you're taking a supplement without that nutrient and in isolation, you are creating imbalances in your body and possibly even worse.
Well, I remember Colin Campbell's book. I had read it over the last few months, where they took 100 grams of apple and proved that the measurable vitamin C was 5.7 milligrams. But when it was eaten, it was 263 times more potent than that. And it was because of all the vitamin C-like chemicals that actually came to life once you ate the whole apple or a piece of the apple. But I still don't get why 52% of Americans still take supplements.
Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. The first one is because most Americans are eating a highly processed diet. And these foods are incredibly depleted. In fact, so much nutrition is found in the skins or the outer hulls that has been processed out of the foods. In fact, Dr. Michael Greger, who is a plant-based doctor, has a video showing how blueberries, the fiber that reaches our large intestines, there's actually polyphenols that the colon bacteria is able to extract from that fiber that they previously thought was just a empty nutrient that we didn't need. So that is part of it. The other part of it is because of all these processed foods, it's convenience. We've got this take a pill mentality. Well, I can keep eating my same, depleted diet. If I take this nutritional supplement, it'll cancel out. It'll make up for it. Another popular explanation given by people who promote supplements is that the soil is depleted. Now, that's true. However, my husband is a certified arborist. We like to do organic gardening. And there's a condition in plants called chlorosis. And when a plant has chlorosis, because the molecule of the hemoglobin, the center of that is iron, the center of the molecule for chlorophyll is magnesium. If a plant has got a magnesium deficiency, it's no longer green, it's yellow. That yellow spinach or romaine lettuce or kale would never go to market and you would never eat it. So if you see a healthy green colored leaf, you know you're getting magnesium and iron. So the other thing is financial interests. You've got the marketing for various foods showing their fortified cereals and upplaying this particular food is high in this nutrient, et cetera, et cetera. So as Dr. Campbell mentions in his book Whole, there's this reductionist thinking that science has funded studies showing the benefits of isolated nutrients.
Well, I have to agree with you. The supplemental industry tries to get us to believe that there is a single active ingredient in healthy foods that we can take it out of context while still maintaining its effect, and that's not the case. If you don't eat the whole food, you're not going to get the full value of what you're eating. These supplements are okay in some cases, and with different I would say with different maladies that you might have. I know that they're ordered by doctors sometimes. I've taken some myself. But you're still better off with the whole food product if you want to actually get well in a natural way. Can you give us a definition of what whole food is?
Yeah. So basically, a whole food is a food that looks like what you would grow in your garden. So if I go and I pick a vine-ripened tomato and I eat it, that's a whole food. If I then go and, blend it into a puree and make a tomato paste or sauce, that's not a whole food. If you take a oatmeal that has been, grown on the stalk, But if I go and then I, grind it into flour, that's processing. So anytime man has had its hands on a food and has put it in a factory and either added a chemical to it or has taken something away, such as the fiber, you now have a processed food.
So you're saying that without the fiber, we're losing all our essential nutrients. Is that right?
There is most of the vitamin B and a lot of minerals that are on the fiber. And what you are left with is the endosperm of the grain, which is just basically what we call the empty calories. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners know that these empty calories are what contribute to obesity and insulin resistance and, fatty liver and all these other things. But what people don't realize, it used to be thought that fiber was just this throwaway thing that we don't need. Our large intestines, literally, the only food that it feeds on is fiber. They ferment the fiber into short-chain fatty acids, which we then use as energy, and they actually manufacture certain vitamins in our gut, such as B12. So when we eat a fiber-deficient diet, we are literally starving our gut bacteria, and they end up eating away the mucus lining of our gut, which causes leaky gut, which causes a lot of this inflammation and autoimmune. Interestingly, animal foods have got zero fiber. They also are the only food group that has cholesterol. Conversely, plant foods are the only food group that have fiber and the only food group that doesn't have cholesterol. So when we look at the long-lived blue zones, the National Geographic did a profile on these groups of people throughout the world that were like clustered, and they had the highest rates of centenarians. And the reason they got the name blue zones is because they took a blue marker and circled those geographical areas with a blue pen. Those people, what they have found a common denominator is they eat a primarily plant-based diet.
Where are most of these blue zones located?
Well, Okinawa, Japan is one of them. You have Loma Linda, California, the Seventh-day Adventists, which is the one located in the United States. So we can see it's not just, these cultures that are living in third world countries. We can do it even here in a modern country. You've got Sardinia, Italy. You have Icaria, Greece. And you have the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica.
Well, I'll tell you, I have to let you know that every time I go to the produce section, there's never a line there.
I know, right?
Especially in the organic section. I never have a problem finding what I want.
Right.
Can you explain to us what the harm is in taking supplements, and do most people just think they are an insurance policy?
Right. So the first harm that's done is mainly mental or psychological. There's this false sense of security that comes, which basically immobilizes people from making the changes in their diet that they really need to make. And so this false sense of security, this take-a-pill mentality, it's kind of like a smoker who really should quit smoking, but they take a vitamin A or vitamin E supplement thinking they're going to cancel out the harmful effects of the smoking. So we really need to make the changes in our diet and not take the supplements. The second thing is one of the most common challenges I hear from people on not changing over to a healthier diet is the expense. They say, oh, produce is too expensive. And yet those same people might be spending $100 or more per month on taking supplements. That money, I feel, would be far better invested in eating your they call it the pharmacy, the FARMACY, right? Go to your produce section for your supplements.
Hold on one second. Let me just hold you up there.
Okay.
We have to take a quick break, but we'll be back in a few minutes for your listening to Healthy Conclusions with Bob Neugebauer on 580 KIDO. Welcome back to Healthy Conclusions on 580 KIDO. We're speaking with Michelle Martinez from the website The Fruit Doctor. So continue on where we were, Michelle, if you would.
So lastly, we talked about how when we take these supplements in isolated form, they can create imbalances in the body. So for example, let's take iron. Iron can come in two forms. It can be either in heme or non-heme iron. Now this heme iron is found in the supplements, and it even is found in animal foods. Heme iron is often touted as by the agricultural industry and the supplement industry as highly absorbable, and that this is a good thing. Actually, it's not a good thing because it creates excess iron in the body. And as a lot of people have seen, it's raining out today. When you leave a car out in the rain, in the moisture, iron oxidizes and it rusts. Well, it does the same thing in our bodies. So what ends up happening is they have found the beta amyloid plaques in Alzheimer's patients have got iron in them. They're also made of cholesterol. And so this oxidized iron is what's, actually destroying the synapses between the memory cells. The other thing that it does with this oxidization is it can cause cancer. And so it explains why people like Dana Reeves, who was married to the late Christopher Reeves, and she was never a smoker, he wasn't a smoker, how she got lung cancer. So what are the sources of this iron? Well, cooking in cast iron pots is one of them. Multivitamins that, especially women of menstruation age have been, encouraged by doctors and by the media to take iron supplements for blood loss. And then, of course, you've got meat. Everybody's been encouraged to eat red meat because it's high in iron. The reason people have been encouraged to take iron is because of anemia. Well, there's a lot of different causes for anemia, but blood loss from menstruation is just one of them. But a lot of people don't realize that dairy products are very inflammatory, and they cause these microscopic bleeding in the gut, which is not detectable by normal blood tests, but it causes clinical, anemia. So sometimes it's a matter of simply removing the dairy products from the diet, which resolves the bleeding, and you then have your red blood cells that are able to keep up to, standard levels. Lack of exercise can cause anemia as well. So there was actually a physician who went on a paleo diet, and on this paleo diet developed ulcerative colitis, which caused intestinal bleeding. Interestingly, the hospital that he went to get treated used a plant-based vegetarian diet, which was able to reverse it because there's compounds in the meat that actually causes inflammation.
I'd just like to get back to these supplements for a minute. People talk about these supplements having caused problems in people's systems when they take too many or they take the wrong kind. But I understand a large number of studies on vitamin supplements, the evaluation was that there is little or no evidence that routine vitamin supplements improve your health, and in fact, they can actually contribute to premature death. I mean, is that true?
Well, absolutely. And so the next vitamin A, is one of those. Oftentimes we've heard that vitamin E is good for lung cancer. Well, again, vitamin A comes in two forms. There's preformed vitamin A, which is retinol, and many people will recognize that name or that word is found in acne creams and in anti-aging creams. Then there's this proformed vitamin A, which is beta-carotene, which is found in plant foods. Again, this vitamin A, this retinol, is highly absorbed in the body, and there's actually a name for it. It's called hypervitaminosis A, and it's when vitamin A levels, vitamin A is one of those fat-soluble vitamins that can build up in the body, and it becomes toxic. And what happens is it actually stops bone growth, and it can contribute to osteoporosis. Well, aside from supplements, again, the food group, which is high in vitamin A, is liver, eggs, certain animal foods. So when you look at the countries that have the highest rates of hip fractures and osteoporosis, Norway, Denmark, Germany, these are the countries that eat a lot of fish, a lot of dairy, a lot of liver. So if you want to get this beta-carotene, which the body then converts to vitamin A as needed and excretes the rest, leafy green vegetables, orange vegetables, papayas, cantaloupe, sweet potatoes, carrots, that type of thing, we can get what we need from plants.
Well, let me ask you a couple more questions because vitamins, I took them for years. I still do take some. There is something called liposomal, which actually gets into your system, gets right into your bloodstream rather than going through the digestive system. The way they package them now in these little modules, it will go right into your system, like vitamin C. You can take vitamin C up to 2,500 milligrams, and your body may absorb that much. But if you want to take 10,000 milligrams, you can't do that unless you take the liposomal vitamin C. So I would think that there is a difference in the vitamins that you buy, if you buy any at all, that the supplements are not all equal, that there are some out there that may be beneficial depending on what they're being used for and how they're being used.
Yeah, I've been doing a series of videos on my YouTube channel about vitamin C and these different nutrients and how people are using them. So much of disease that we have today are caused from not necessarily deficiencies. We're not seeing beriberi or rickets or scurvy or these deficiency diseases of, the last century. What we're seeing is overnutrition, and particularly overnutrition from the saturated fat and the animal foods, the refined vegetable oils, and the refined grains. So when we focus on reducing those and getting in the whole foods, the body's got infinite intelligence. If I cut my finger without me doing anything, my body knows how to heal that finger. I don't have to do anything. And so that same innate intelligence in my body knows how to take the nutrients it needs from that whole food and absorb it in just the right amounts and excrete the rest.
Well, when you talk about hydrogenated oils, like some of the ones that they make nowadays, canola oil, and some of these others that aren't expeller pressed, they are dangerous, and they have been proven to be dangerous, and I don't understand why people don't get off them. But what are the good oils that you can use for cooking? I know there are several out there.
I don't recommend any oils. Again, oils are refined foods. The fiber has been taken out, and you're getting a very concentrated source of calories and a very concentrated source. A lot of these oils are very highly oxidized once exposed to light and to heat. So, if you want your omega-3s, have the whole flax seeds, have the chia seeds, get your leafy greens. If you want the omega-6s, see, out of the fat groups, your body can make monounsaturated fats and saturated fats from carbohydrates. You don't need those from your diet. The reasons that the essential fats are called essential is because your body cannot make them. You must get them from your diet. The only essential fats are the omega-3s and the omega-6s. And those food groups that I just mentioned, including some nuts and seeds, are the sources that you would find them in.
Okay, we're going to have to take another break here. We'll be back in a few minutes. And you're listening to Healthy Conclusions with Bob Neugebauer and Michelle Martinez from The Fruit Doctor on 580 KIDO. Welcome back to Healthy Conclusions on 580 KIDO. We're speaking with Michelle Martinez from The Fruit Doctor. Would you continue on, Michelle? I'd just like to ask you a question here on these oils we were talking about. There are so many doctors out there in the health field that are recommending coconut oil or MCT oil, olive oil, avocado oil, all of these as cooking oils if you're going to do any cooking. Why do you think these are bad for people?
Really great question. Some of my coconut oil YouTube videos are some of my most highly watched and highly controversial. Let me just say this. Let's appeal to common sense. Out of the 5 blue zones that I talked about, not one of them is eating coconut oil. Not one. So what we have to do is, again, number one, coconut oil is not the same thing as the coconut meat found in a whole coconut. And in moderation, that's fine. You mentioned about the short-chain fatty acids or the medium-chain fatty acids found in coconut oil. When we look at a whole food, we need to take a look at the entire package. If I eat a dairy product, sure, it's high in calcium, but it's also high in a lot of other things that I don't want on my body, and there are other ways of getting the calcium. Coconut oil has got 92% of its calories from saturated fat, which is even more than butter. So right there, we have a huge flag. But the other thing with coconut oil is that we are dealing with, a lot of people don't realize that saturated fat is the main cause of diabetes in addition to the refined sugars. So I've had clients that were having severe adrenal fatigue and were having trouble losing weight. As soon as I got them off of the coconut oil, all of that reversed. I mean, almost immediately, because what happens when we eat high amounts of foods is our red blood cells literally clump together. You can see it on the live cell imaging, and they form what's called rouleaux. They're like rolls of quarters. Our blood cells can actually fold in half, and that's how they get into the small capillaries of our body. When they clump together in those groups, they can no longer get into the capillaries, and our oxygen levels in our body can literally drop by about 30%, which is why we feel sluggish after a really big meal. So if you want high energy and you want to have great circulation, you're going to want to have a very low-fat diet.
Well, in that case, if you're talking about a low-fat diet, what about all this work that Dr. Seyfried has done up in Boston on the ketogenic diet? And I even know Dr. McCullough has just come out with a new book on fat is good and how you can actually run your body on fat. And basically it's ketones.
So what I have found is that there are basically four main markers that people like to test. We like to look at triglycerides, we like to look at cholesterol, we like to look at blood glucose and insulin. Now, ketogenic diets will give you great blood glucose readings because you're not taking any sugar in or any carbohydrate in. However, it will raise your insulin levels, and that's not a good thing. So it's really important that we have to take a look at what I've done a lot of research on ketogenic diets. There's a lot of nutritional deficiencies that can happen on them. They've been used extensively on children with epilepsy, and oftentimes they end up having kidney issues and different deficiencies. So you can get all the same benefits that you get on a ketogenic diet with a low-fat, plant-based, whole foods diet. Here's the reason that people have gotten away from quote-unquote low-fat. When they go low-fat, they are going refined carbs. They are doing bagels. They're doing muffins. They're doing pastas. They're doing all these refined grains.
Doesn't sound like low-fat to me.
It may be low-fat. You can get a fat-free Entenmann's, bagel, but you're not getting any nutrition and you're not getting any fiber. I'm talking about what are the Okinawans eating. Did you know 70% of their diet was from sweet potatoes? That is a low-fat food, but it is high in beta-carotene, it's high in fiber, and they grow a lot of their own fruits and vegetables. You can get an apple. That's a low-fat food, but as you mentioned earlier, look at the nutrition in an apple. That is completely different than eating pasta or eating flour.
Well, let's go back to eating beef, and again, that's another controversial issue, especially when it comes to grass-fed beef. I agree with today's concentrated animal feeding operations and the high concentrations of antibiotics that they feed these animals, and I would stay away from meat that has been brought to light on these studies. But as far as organic grass-fed beef, everything I read about this is that it's lower in fat, it's higher in B vitamins, thiamine, riboflavin. I mean, there is nothing but good stuff in there, and it's also high in omega. There are several recent books out that even talk about this on the ketogenic diet, where they recommend the grass-fed beef, not in large quantities, but as part of the diet.
Right. And I would agree with you, Bob. Yes, we're grateful that there's not the pesticides in there. They're not feeding them the GMO soy or corn. You're not getting the hormones that are being injected into them, and they're more humanely raised. There's no argument with that. However, even with that said, there are still things inherently harmful with animal foods as a group that have nothing to do with how they are raised. For example, we talked about earlier the heme iron. That is in grass-fed as well as factory-raised. So you have that issue. We have another issue with the high protein concentrations, which raise a substance in our body called IGF-1. It's called insulin growth-like factor. It's naturally present in mother's milk when they are nursing their child, and it's what doubles an infant's weight in 3 months when they're born. It's in mother's milk. So when we have insulin growth-like factor levels in our body, which are really, really high, it not only causes our normal cells to multiply and divide more quickly, it actually makes cancer cells grow more quickly as well. In fact, they found a group of genetically dwarfs with Laron syndrome, which they have naturally low levels of IGF-1. They have the lowest rates of cancer, the lowest rates of diabetes, despite their diet. And people who have been, the very, very tall people that are, almost 7 feet tall who have genetically high rates of IGF-1 get higher rates of these diseases. So animal high, protein foods like beef raise IGF levels in the body. We talked about vitamin A, the retinol, that preformed vitamin A, very high in animal foods. Animal foods have zero fiber, so there's nothing for the colon bacteria to ferment. It's got cholesterol, and whether or not a beef is low in fat has no bearing on how much cholesterol a food has. You've got as much cholesterol in a piece of fish than you do in a piece of steak, and a lot of people don't know that. But here's the thing. Dr. Neal Barnard, who is a plant-based physician, has got several best-selling books out on the market. His family was raised in Wyoming, and they go back generations as cattle ranchers. It was all grass-fed. His father was a physician. His father got Alzheimer's, which led Dr. Barnard to write the book Power Foods for Your Brain. He talked a lot about the animal food saturated connection with Alzheimer's. And he said, grass-fed did not keep his, father from getting Alzheimer's. And so we've got Howard Lyman. He was a cattle rancher in Montana for generations. His, book, Mad Cowboy, he got a spinal tumor. He was on Oprah. In fact, remember 20 years ago when Oprah was sued by the Cattlemen's Association down in Texas, and that's how she met Dr. Phil and Dr. Greger? Well, that was because Howard Lyman was on her show talking about mad cow disease and all these other things. So there are still elements in the grass-fed that, even though it's a healthier option, it is still not. When you look at these blue zones eating a plant-based diet, their animal food product consumption is maybe once a month, at most once a week. We're talking very, very small amounts.
Well, even when you, even when you read some of these books about the ketogenic diet, everybody says that everything in moderation. They don't want you to eat a lot of meat. But I will tell you that having talked with several physicians about this, and one clinician back in New York that does enzyme therapy, that when they do take you in as a patient, they do take a hair sample, and they decide whether you're a protein eater or not. And they can tell, but I don't know how, but by your hair, whether you're better off having more protein or no protein or less protein. Now, is this something that you come up with in your studies? I mean, this is something I was told when I brought my wife out there.
So the only scientific proven method for lifespan extension is calorie restriction. And they have an acronym called CRON, Calorie Restriction with Optimal Nutrition. And what they have found in humans was it wasn't so much calorie restriction that can extend lifespan as opposed to protein restriction. In particular, there's an amino acid called methionine. It's a sulfur-containing amino acid. And cancer cells are methionine dependent, meaning your body, if it's deprived of methionine, your normal cells will thrive, but cancer cells will die. So what they found was, rather than restricting calories, if we restrict protein down to, and Dr. Campbell recommends less than 10% of our calories from protein, then we actually thrive. In fact, the World Health Organization says, 7% of calories is fine. When you look at mother's milk, okay, a baby, that's when they're growing the fastest. Mother's milk only has 5% of its calories from protein. So protein has been oversold as this miracle nutrient. Let's talk about amino acids. You have about 20 amino acids, just like the letters of the alphabet that have 26 letters, and all of the words in the English language are formed by different combinations of these different letters. Well, all of the 10,000 different proteins in your body are made from different combinations of these amino acids. Now, out of those 20 amino acids, 12 of them your body can synthesize, meaning it can make. Only 8 are essential, meaning you must get them from your diet. Out of those 8 essential amino acids, they are only found in the plant kingdom. So when you eat an animal foods-based diet, you are getting the amino acids in that animal food that animal had eaten from grass. So why not cut out the middleman and get your protein from plants? And you'll be getting plenty of protein. In fact, there's vegan bodybuilders. There's a vegan bodybuilding.com website. They're gaining muscle on eating nothing but plants.
Okay, we're going to have to take another break here, folks. We'll be back with you in a few minutes. You're listening to Healthy Conclusions with Bob Neugebauer and Michelle Martinez from The Fruit Doctor, 580 KIDO. Welcome back, folks. We had to take a quick break, but we're back here with Healthy Conclusions on 580 KIDO, and we're speaking with Michelle Martinez of The Fruit Doctor. So I'd like to continue on with our conversation about meat and the protein in it and how much it's worth or not worth in terms of your diet. But when I take a look at what happens in the production of animal protein, it requires 8 times as much fossil fuel as plant protein, which is what you're talking about. And the livestock population in the United States consumes 5 times as much grain as the country's entire human population. For every kilogram of beef, it requires 1,000 liters of water to produce. So when you look at these facts, environmentally, let's face it, beef is a problem. But, of course, we live in a beef state here, so I'm not going to say that too loudly, or I may find my car disappearing outside the parking lot.
Great topic, Bob. I'm not here to threaten somebody's livelihood. I realize we all need to make a living. One thing that Dr. Campbell in his sequel, Plant Pure Nation, talked about, they did a jump start down in the Deep South, and they put people on a plant-based diet for 10 days, and they measured their blood lipids before and after, one of whom was a cattle farmer. And they asked him, once he saw his cholesterol go down, all his vector toward normal, he said, how do you feel about your business knowing now the effect that it's having on your body? And he said, you know what? We used to be in the pickle industry. We grew cucumbers to pickle. And he says, we transferred our farm and transformed it into cattle because we thought that's what the public wanted. We have the land. We can easily transform it back. Idaho, the number 1 crop is potatoes. The number 2 crop is garbanzo beans. There's a gentleman in Australia, I interviewed him, Andrew Taylor, his channel name is SpudFit. He lived on potatoes for an entire year. The man lost over 110 pounds. I just met him 3 weeks ago. Idaho is the potato state. So, we've got Fruitland. We've got all of these beautiful orchards. We can easily make this transition back to selling more organic produce. Do you know that organic produce market is growing leaps and bounds and it's highly profitable? I would love to see our farmers markets thrive here, and we've got farmers here that could do it.
Well, I know I've seen what's happened in the organic market, because now I can walk into Costco and actually find a rather large selection of organic products, and even in the produce department, which I'm kind of surprised at. I'd like to talk about a couple more things and get into this idea about gluten and how people are intolerant to it, because you're talking about eating whole plant food, and there are a lot of the grains out there that are causing this autoimmune disease. And I had Dr. Karlsfeld on last week. We talked somewhat about this. But can you get into this a little bit? Talk about the confusion that comes from lunking refined flours with the whole grains?
Yeah, so there's a couple issues with this. Very few people are genuinely celiac. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't a gluten intolerance or gluten insensitivity in other people. Now, there's a couple issues here that cause confusions. First of all, we need to make sure we're eating organic grains and not GMO grains, because GMO grains, corn, soy, rice, will inflame the gut. In fact, the corn is designed to cause the intestines to explode in the insect that eats it.
We're going to have you talk to Dave Petzo, who was on here on Monday, saying he loves GMOs.
All right. Well, so that's one issue. So we want to make sure that it's organic. But the second issue is people have lumped carbs under just one umbrella when in fact good carbs feed our healthy gut bacteria and help it to heal, whereas the refined carbs are digested in our small intestines and cause this small intestinal bacteria overgrowth and problems, and then starve our large intestines. So when we're eating white flour and sugar and cornmeal and all these processed, highly refined carbs, yes, you are going to have bowel problems. But if you're eating sweet potatoes and legumes and, rice, which is what these blue zone groups have been eating on for centuries, those are actually very healing foods for the gut. Whole foods, vegetables, leafy greens, all of those foods are very, very healing for the gut.
Well, that's interesting. I'd like to talk a little bit about your worry about depleted soils. And I understand your husband's an arborist and that you do a lot of growing on your own at your house organically using hydroponics. Is that correct?
Yeah, one of the other intense interests of mine, I've actually got my certificate in permaculture. And permaculture is a broad term on creating ecosystems that are in harmony using natural inputs and not man-made inputs. So it encompasses solar panels, it encompasses cob building, it encompasses organic gardening. And so we've got fruit trees on our property with swales, and we've got all sorts of things we're growing out in our garden. Well, Idaho has a short growing season, and so right now we have a tower garden inside of our house where I've got a cucumber about 3 inches long, and I have tomatoes growing on my tower garden. I know exactly what nutrients are going into that water because I put them in myself. I haven't sprayed them, and so I am growing my own organic produce here in the middle of March.
I think that's terrific. If somebody would like to learn how to do that or get in touch with you, how can they get in touch with you?
So I've got the Fruit Doctor. Doctor is spelled out at Gmail is an email that they can get a hold of me. They've got a contact form on my website, thefruitdoctor.com. And then I've got over 500 videos on my YouTube channel, The Fruit Doctor, where I share a lot of this information. I film my tower garden so you can see what it looks and, just get some really good alternative information.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Michelle, for joining us this evening and for your enlightenment on nutritional benefits of whole plant-based food diets. This is Bob Neugebauer signing off for Healthy Conclusions, and we hope you will join us again at the same time next Sunday for another hour of informative talk about nutrition, exercise, and alternative medicine, sponsored by AltruaHealthShare.org.